Hey everybody, welcome to another CrushLivePoker.com hand review. I am Bart Hanson, and today we're going to take a look at a hand that I played against Crypto Wesley from about a month and a half ago on the Hustler Casino live stream. This was played at the end of May, right before the World Series. Wesley has been in the news quite a bit, I would say, over the last couple months, talking up a lot of stuff on social media about his poker skills, and he made a good run in the main event, and he's been a fixture lately on Hustler Casino Live, and I'm looking forward to going back from Massachusetts to California and playing in this game on a monthly basis. This is actually the first of two hands that we're going to take a look at this week that I played against Wesley in this session. This is the 5-5 with 100 ante game that goes on Thursdays and sometimes Tuesdays. It's the game that I usually get to play in, and it's a lot of fun because it's big, it's pretty soft, a lot of recreational players, and the hands go very, very multi-way, sometimes even cold calls and 3-bet pots and 4-bet pots. So it's just your typical live poker setup. So let's get into it here, and do me a favor, if you do like what you see, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. So here we go. I'm going to be on the button here to start this one off, and we're going to do another blackout job here. People seem to like that, where we black out the percentages and the hands. And this one's going to start off with a raise here from Mike Nia, who is another, I would say, villain in a good way, but one of my nemesises on this particular show. If you took a look at the video that I put up a couple of months ago, he's going to open here with ace-3 offsuit from under the gun, and it is going to get around here to Wesley in the cutoff, and he makes the call. And this is sort of my first kind of inflection point here. I am on the button here with Jack-9 of hearts, and this is a situation where I could possibly squeeze. If I had known that Mike Nia was really all this light and Wesley was playing that wide, I probably would have squeezed from the button. But usually I like to take the approach, especially on the button, where I will squeeze with the extra dead money in the middle with some of my better hands, and some of my worst playable hands I will just call. And that's exactly what I did here. I called. And of course, you're incentivized to drive the people out in the blinds. But in this particular case, it was Nick Vertucci in the small blind, this guy Henry, two of the tighter players at the table. So I wasn't really overly concerned with them sort of completing with a lot of junk. But you can see the stack sizes here. I've got 21,000. Wesley has 30,000. But Henry actually does come in here in the big blind with 7-4 suited. And we get this sort of typical Hustler Live Casino four-way pot, $1,300 here to the flop. And you can see that I have flopped top pair here, Jack deuce 8 with a couple spades. I really have like the worst jack that I would ever have in a spot like this. V-pipping like Jack-9 suited. I'm not really going to have Jack-7, Jack-6, something like that. So it's going to get checked over to here to Mike Nia, and you can see that he checks. He is just totally whiffed here. So over to Wesley in the cutoff, who is the initial field caller, and he's going to bet 300. And I am faced with a situation here that is definitely non-standard. This is something that I might only do like a handful of times, especially in a game like this. I have top pair, but I have a hand that is very vulnerable to draws. It's also vulnerable to overcards, and the preflop raiser is definitely the type that actually might peel with a couple of overcards. So I actually thought that there was some value in raising here. It's not really a play that you're going to see a ton in a cash game, but I actually thought that this was really the right time to do it, where Wesley is betting, and he could be betting with any piece. He could be betting with any draw. I can get value from him, and I really can drive out some of the other players behind me. I don't think Mike Nia is really the type to check a whole lot of overpairs, but if I do raise here and he calls, I certainly will shut it down in a given situation. So Wesley here bets to 300, and I decide to raise. You can see those green chips are 1K chips, the whites are hundreds, and I raise it up here to 1100. Now both these guys get out of the way, obviously Henry and Mike Nia, and I get a response that I certainly was not expecting here. Wesley, as the field caller and flop better, is going to bet 3-bet here to 2300. So again, I go to 1100 and he bet 3-bets here to 2300. Now, one of the things that I think in the heat of the moment didn't sort of quite take in was really the small sizing. I was sort of fixed on the fact that I was like, whoa, this is a bet 3-bet. This is a very, very polar situation on the flop, which it probably is, but this is kind of like a little bit of a click back here. I mean, 3 to 11 to 23. It is definitely quite interesting. And one of the first things that really just came out, right off the top of my head was that this looks like a draw to me. Now, I don't think that Wesley's going to have pocket jacks. I think he's going to 3-bet that. Now, he might have a hand like pocket eights or pocket deuces, but there's just no way that I'm going to fold now here, especially to this sizing where it's 1200 for me to call, 4700 of the pot. I really kind of tagged him on having a draw here. So there was really nothing for me to do but continue on. I have a little bit of a backdoor here with the 9. So I make the call. And I was like, we'll see what happens. We'll see what, how things develop and what he does. So the turn here is a really, really good card for me to bluff catch, meaning that when the deuce comes, I think it skews his hand more towards draws because there's less combinations of pocket deuces here. Now he can still have 8-8, but anytime the board is pairing and you think that your opponent is really, really strong with a hand like 2-pair plus or a set, and then one of the board cards pair, that is a very, very good situation for you to bluff catch. And again, like in the heat of the moment, I was kind of fixated on the fact that Wesley bet 3-bet the flop and then he again bet the turn. Looking back at this, his bet isn't so large on the turn. I mean, it was about half the size of the pot. And obviously, there really isn't anything for me to do here but call again. And I was absolutely prepared to call down pretty much the whole way, unless something crazy happened, like a spade, something like that. So, obviously, I'm fairly deliberate about this, and I make the call. One thing of note here, too, Wesley is never going to have an overpair because those are really going to be 3-bet off. And I never thought that he had, like, a jack with a high kicker. Like, he's not going to play this hand this way with like king jack off, queen jack off, jack 10 off. Really, his flop range is going to be draws, set of deuces, set of eights. One little thing here too, depending on how many hands he's going to play, I suppose he could have jack 8 suited. But the thing about this is that I have the jack of hearts in my hand, the jack of clubs is out there, and the 8 of spades is out there, which really, really only leaves one combination of jack 8 suited that might be played this way, of course, which would be jack 8 of diamonds. Now, if he was really, really far out there, could he have like jack deuce suited? I suppose it's possible. 8 deuce suited, maybe some jack 8, something like that, but nothing really for me to do here but to call. And I was just really, really fixated on the fact that this is going to be a bluff catch on a lot of blanks. So now the pot is over 11,900, just under 12,000. And the river here is a 9. So the river here is a 9, and I make top 2 pair. Now, obviously I improve, but if you do take a look at the range really that we put him on, which is mostly going to be draws, or really, really thick value hands, there are extreme scenarios where if it gets checked to you at the end and you think your opponent is sandbagging something once in a while, or he's taken a line where he's given up with a draw, even if you have a strong hand, even sometimes if you have a hand as strong as like the second or third nuts in an extreme scenario, the right play is actually to check back. Because unless he's going to say check raise the river with his bluffs, let's say throw that out right now, there really isn't value in betting if he's just going to fold out all his bluffs and then some of his value beats you, even if you're good like 95% of the time. Remember, on the river, especially in position, when it gets checked to you, it's as if you are betting into a dry side pot, because you could check behind and just win the pot. But when you're betting for value, you have to be called more than 50% of the time for the bet to be profitable, because you're really getting 1-to-1 on the bet. So again, I was very, very fixated on the fact that his line was very, very bluffy, because I didn't think that he was going to be bet three betting with a hand like King Jack, Queen Jack, Jack 10, something like that. The whole hand, I thought he was just full of shit and he was bluffing. And now all of a sudden we kind of back in to improvement, and he takes a long, long time with it, and then he finally checks. So he finally checks, and this is where I have my decision. Now, before you flame me, before you see what I do, I think that I want to ask all of you out there, if you had King Jack or Ace Jack here, would you value bet? And I think most people would say with this given line that they would not. The only difference here between me having really Ace Jack or King Jack is now I beat Jack 8. And I think the likelihood that he has a hand like Jack 8 combinations wise and with this line is very, very slim. Because again, there's really only one specific combo of Jack 8 suited. Now, if he were to have, if he sometimes showed up with Jack 8 offsuit, there's obviously some more combinations. But not only would he have to be in there with the Jack 8, bet 3 bet the, first of all, he'd have to bet 3 bet the flop, which is possible. But then he would have to check the river on this 9. Now, I do make some draws if I have a combo draw, like if I had 7-9 of spades, if I had Queen 10 of spades, something like that. So it's not really the cleanest card for him at the end, but I just thought that he was skewed towards a lot of bluffs. He did not have a hand like King Jack or Queen Jack, and Jack 8 is such a small, small portion of his range that this was one of the situations where, even though I'm going to have the best hand here like 90-95% of the time given his line, I actually didn't think that there was a ton of value in betting here. Now, there is one other option that is possible when you're in a situation like this, and then this is sort of what I like to call like the reverse river block. We talk about a river, we talk about a turn block. Sometimes we talk about block betting on the turn in position to get a free showdown. Usually we don't talk about making a river block, but what a river block would do here, and I'm talking about betting like 1/10 the size of the pot. If I were to bet, say, like 1,000, 2,000, and I thought that Wesley was full of shit and he had a lot of draws, I'm actually trying to induce a check raise. So once in a while, if you think your opponent has a draw and he's just given up, and you might be in a situation like this where you're like, okay, I'll just check and win the pot because I think that you're just totally bluffing, there is that third option where you can make like a mini bet and try to induce an aggressive player to check raise. There are situations where they might have just been like, all right, I was just giving up on the pot, but now their opponent puts in like a tiny, tiny bet that looks like value, and then all of a sudden a hand that they were going to fold suddenly turns into something that they're going to try to bluff because you make such a small bet at the end.
I don't think you have anything, so I'm going to check. I'm going to make a nitty check behind. Check. 7, 8. Okay.
So I do say I don't think you have anything, and I check, and he shows up with actually a hand that is quite interesting. He shows up with 7-8 offsuit, and the reason why I think that that's interesting is because it's obvious that his play, on paper, his play looks to be, sometimes you can't even know what his play is when you're looking at this, but it's a combination, I would say, value if he thought that I had a draw / a semi-bluff. I don't know what he thought, like if he thought that I had a draw, and then when he bet 3 bet the flop, he was doing that for value, or he thought he could get me off of a jack. This is sometimes where we talk about this term that was coined years ago called a combo bet. and I don't know, some people think that I made the term up. I did not. I heard it from some other place. But a combo bet or a combo raise is a situation non-intuitively where you make an aggressive play through a bet or a raise where you will sometimes get better to fold and worse to call. Now, how is that possible? It's possible when you get worse to call in the form of draws and you get a better hand to fold, like, for example, like a weak top pair or something like that. This one's a little bit interesting because it's kind of in between for him. I don't know what he was necessarily thinking about. But I will say that if I probably bet like 20 to 25%, if I knew that he had 7-8, I think I probably would have gotten a call. But again, I don't want to be results oriented, and I want to go back to thinking about what would I do here with King Jack, Ace Jack? What would you guys do as viewers? If you think King Jack and Ace Jack are checks here, if we overcalled, I think probably the most likely hand that we might overcall in a spot like this might be King Jack or Queen Jack off, and we played it this way. If those hands are checks back, remember Wesley's not going to have really Ace Jack here as played. If King Jack and Queen Jack are check backs, then really what's the difference between Jack 9 and those hands? Because I think it's very, very easy to say, how could you not value bet the river? You have top two. The only difference is if he played Jack 8 like that and he got there, I'm not saying that he wouldn't have called here with 7-8, but if I had King Jack, Queen Jack, he would have called with 7-8. There's really no difference between Jack 9 and 7-8. So I thought this was a fun hand. Wesley, you lost max value, came out of him, and look forward to showing you guys another hand coming up this week as well that has to deal with Wesley value owning himself against me.